Hey there. You guys hear me okay? Sorry for the delay. My computer decided to crash just as we were starting the meeting. So you gotta love Microsoft. So,
Or not.
or not. Don't think I'd ever actually say that earnestly ever. Um, so I think we are all here plus our guest, Isaac. So why don't I call us to order at 5:01? And oh, I didn't my little cheat sheet about who's taking minutes closed with everything else. Miriam, Nate, do you guys remember who's next, or should I just look it up?
I couldn't find the minute. Did I do the minutes last time?
No, Gail did. You couldn't find them.
I don't think it's me.
It's Nate.
Okay. It's Gail, you're next?
No, I just did them.
Yeah, so I thought. So Nate, can you do it?
I can do it. Yeah. It's been a while. I
Can hear
know.
you.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, Michael can't hear me, but Gail can. It's Microsoft.
Since Nate's going to be talking to us most of the meeting, it'll be problematic.
Let's see.
You
Gail
can-
can. How about others? Okay, so Isaac and Gail can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, it's just Michael.
Cool. Now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
Yay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great. So
Magic.
Nate, you're okay taking minutes, even though you're talking?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
been a while. So I'm happy to do it.
Great, thank you. Cool. Well, I'll call us to order at 5:02. And before we welcome Isaac, I just want to do the perfunctory, any public comments since we don't have any public besides Isaac. I think we can move on. So Isaac, welcome. Thanks for joining us. And so I think, what we had all discussed was we've got to regrow back from our four back to seven. And at town meeting, Isaac could come forth and talk to me and then to Nate about his interest in being part of ECAC. And so what we as a group decided was that we'd ask people to send in a little blurb, which he did, and come to this meeting and just sort of get a sense of who he is and let him check us out. And then we could make a decision next meeting, I think is what we decided. But Isaac, why don't you just share a little bit, why don't we all introduce each other? Actually, you've met Nate and you've met me, but Gail and Miriam, you don't know. So
I'm Gail Fleischacre. Live on West Pelham Road. One of the founding members of the committee.
And Miriam.
Yes, I'm
Who are
Miriam.
you?
What? I live on Pratt Corner Road and on the Concom, as you can sort of see my thing here, and the Historical Commission and ECAC.
Great, thank you both. So Isaac, why don't you share with us all why you're interested in ECAC?
You're muted.
Oh, well, that's good. It wasn't just me. It's always weird when volume doesn't work when you think it should.
Mhm.
But let me see.
There we go.
There we go.
Now we got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So for some reason, the settings get weird in Zoom for me. Anyway, initially it was the electricity bill last December that was like, what is going on here? And then I kind of peeled back, I never really paid attention to it, and then it was, the difference in energy between 6 months out of the year and the winter months, and then I started looking into, I talked to Graham Sefton, and he had mentioned energy aggregation and how the town was going forward with that, and I told him, hey, if you need any help with that, you know, I'm an all hands on deck kind of person. So I want to, it's a great thing, and I want to move that forward and put my energy behind that, if possible. So, you know, he had mentioned this and said the first step was the town meeting. I was there and I was able to meet Michael and Nate. And yeah, and then just reading more over what you guys do. I think, you know, it's a really great organization. And plus, I just love being a part of the community. You know, I'm a volunteer firefighter for the town. You know, we've been here about 3 years. I live on Locks Pond with my family. So, and it's an extended family. So I live with my brother and sister-in-law, my wife, and my son. We live in community in our house, and we're just looking to build community. So however we can, we go to Taco Tuesday nights at the SAC, and we, you know, I joined the volunteer fire department with a neighbor, and there's a bunch of great guys who work there, and you know, just to help out, and I just enjoy helping. I'm an academic advisor by trade. I work at UMass, so yeah, that's me in a small nutshell.
Cool. Anyone have any questions for Nate? I mean, for Isaac? Nate, Gail, here?
Do you have any particular interests around climate action? That besides the energy part of it that interests you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, you know, looking at options, like, you know, when Nate sent around he forwarded along the discussion minutes for what we'll be talking about today, and the building code. I mean, I think that also, just like, you know, town governance is the same as, you know, higher education administration, where, you know, you can see needs in the community and you can make or change policies to suit those needs. So I think that this is a great opportunity for that.
Oh,
Gail, do you have a question?
Yeah, there was, at a couple of meetings ago, there was a discussion of history or a study that was done some years ago of wind power, or the possibility of siting wind power. And that study was done long enough ago that there was a remark at the meeting that technology has certainly changed, and that there was a cost benefit analysis at that time with the named sites that said, you know, you could set it up physically, but it's not going to get you anything. And the question was raised at that meeting to bring it up again. And I guess check out, you know, the sites haven't changed, but, you know, has technology changed such that an installation might be very differently affected given the sightings. So I wondered if you'd be interested in looking into that at all.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'm a very curious person, and I'm very much into learning about all the things that can make our community and our climate better.
Yeah.
well, Isaac, hopefully you'll stick around and see how this runs, and, you know, feel free to jump in.
Sure.
So I had one thing I wanted to add to the agenda before we jump into CCA, if that's okay, which is just, I neglected to sort of put just general updates, and there was a few that I just wanted to make sure we resurfaced, if that's okay with everybody. I put it under the unanticipated by chair category. So there's three of them. One involves Miriam, but she doesn't know that yet. But so the first one's from the first one's from me. So I've been participating in this solar forum that UMass has been putting on. So it's 4 weeks of presentations. It's like 3 or 4 hours every Tuesday. And actually, I'm actually presenting next week on the municipal perspective. But today there was the woman who is the director of Green Communities was on. And this is mostly a heads up. That was sort of exciting. So there's a new grant that's coming out. Let's see. I think I can actually share it real quick. Here, I'm going to just share this real quick. You guys see that?
Yes.
So this is her PowerPoint. So this is the thing that she mentioned that I thought was really interesting. So the Municipal Energy Technical Assistance Grants, and It's looking at feasibility studies for clean energy technologies. This is the one that I thought was particularly interesting.
Yep.
And the deadlines are, it's coming up, November 17th is when the deadline is. So I'm assuming sometime in October they might mention it. But the reason I wanted to highlight it was when we had our previous conversation about what we should recommend to the select board for an MVP grant, I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever. One of the things that we talked about was in the MVP grant, just to put solar on all 5 town municipally owned buildings. And we were told explicit by MVP that they're not going to pay for that stuff anymore, which makes no sense to me, but that's what they said. So I'm thinking this might actually be a source of that funding to do that. So
Wait, that stuff being feasibility studies?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because what MVP said the reason MVP said they won't fund it anymore is they don't want to fund consultants to do plans for towns about deployment, and then they decide that there's no follow through or something. That was sort of their rationale. But if we can get money to pay for a plan, then we can actually follow through with that and have a conversation.
Michael, the town didn't get the MVP grant for the school. That didn't happen.
I don't know. Do you know that?
I don't know, but I just feel like why don't we find,
That's a good.
we were the
inquire.
ones who kind of advised the select board about this, but we haven't got any feedback about that application.
That's a good point. I'll ask Becky. I don't know the status of it.
Because they had pitched it to put in solar on the roof at the new library, right? Wasn't that the whole?
Yes. Yeah. Because we already had the permitting done and it was more of a package. So I can find out. I'm assuming Becky knows, maybe Mary Ann, but it's a good point. So anyway, I just wanted to put it on our radar because I'm guessing that somewhere in the next month it might become a public thing. And it'd be nice to follow through on that since we already proposed that to the town. So just an FYI. Gail.
Could we have more than one project? Is this a place where we might check out the feasibility for wind power?
I haven't, there's no RFP out yet, so I'm not quite sure.
Mhm.
There's all that we got is a PowerPoint slide.
Okay. That
So
sounds good. Yeah, okay.
I made sure that I was on the email list for Green Community, so when they release it, I'm assuming I'll get it and then I can share it out.
And this is for green energy for municipal buildings, not for townwide energy needs. That's not
correct. It's focused on municipalities, which is what.
okay.
So, I mean, if we can do wind as an example, and we can get,
But wind
Some
wouldn't
of
be
that-
associated with a particular building.
well, it depends. I mean, you could put wind, say in the backfield behind the school instead of solar, if you couldn't put solar on the school. So, it
There's
remains to be seen.
actually there's systems now where they're wind solar systems where you can have rooftop solar with turbines that are put along the roof ridge of the building so that it supplements the energy production. It's all integrated so that when solar is not producing, like at night, the wind might be producing.
Wow.
Interesting.
Or if you have snow on your panels, you might still be producing wind energy.
Changes in technology. Point made.
Yeah. Yeah. So we shall see. I'll send you the RFP when I see it. So I'm assuming, Gail, you might be getting it because you get these announcements too, I think. So that was sort of number one update. Miriam, you sent us something a few weeks ago. I think it was about stormwater. I just didn't want to bypass it. And if you can't remember it, that's fine. And if you remember it later
I
in the
think in
meeting.
that window, it was to sign up for like a seminar or some trainings, but I think that it was a very tight window where you had to apply. So I think that's gone.
Okay. I was struck, just as an FYI, looking at the pictures of Leominster and the flooding and destruction. I think it's worth circling back to how do we deal with stormwater as a climate
Yep.
related issue.
Well,
And yeah,
yeah, and that's a good point. And we haven't been tracking this as a committee, but the town recently engaged in a process with FERCog to develop a study around the Lake Wyola district around stormwater that's a precursor for being able to apply for DEP action grants. So you have to do this watershed analysis plan before you can apply for DEP grants. And flooding and stormwater around the lake is a huge issue. And we saw it this summer where flooding was washing out the roads, people's properties got flooded because it's low-lying area. It's huge. But I think that there is room for the town to do some things. And we could be maybe helping to move that process along.
I just thought about looking at the roads washed out, like, it's easy to imagine Leverett Road getting eroded because there's so much runoff that it collapses. So, or
Yep.
West Pelham or, anything. So we should just put it back on our agenda and figure that out. Then the last thing I just wanted to mention, because Gail had emailed me, and we can just put it on the agenda for next time. But you all saw that I responded to Susie Mosier because she had a question. And I responded thinking that it was just informational. So, it was fine to just respond. But in thinking about it, because Gail asked, like on the planning board, we have a policy about how it works. Like I respond on behalf of the committee and I basically say, thanks for reaching out to the planning board. We can't have a conversation online. Everyone on the committee gets these emails and we welcome you to a public meeting. So it's something we can discuss, next time. But right now we don't have really a policy about, do we just do a small acknowledgement of receipt and direct them to the next meeting, which is fine. I mean, I know the select board does that as well. So something to ponder, and I'll put it on the agenda for next time, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So without
Here's,
further ado, we should move to the hockey coach and CCA.
Which, by the way, thanks for being so flexible.
Nathan,
with
we
our
are
meeting
your audience
time
for
today.
at least the next 3 items before we get to minutes.
Yeah. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So when last we talked about CCA, we were at the decision point of whether a formal request for proposals is warranted, or if a more informal process for reviewing consultants that could help us set up a CCA plan. So I went into information gathering mode following our last meeting. There are 3 companies that offer consultant services in Western Massachusetts. They're named Good Energy, Colonial Power, and Mass Power Choice. So all of the approved aggregations in the state are listed on the DPU Legal Division website. So you can see which towns are using which brokers in the state. So I wanted to solicit testimonials from clients of each of these 3 consultants, rather than asking the consultants for referrals to their most happy customers. Instead, like, do some random sampling there. So I started reaching out to town administrators and our colleagues, similarly placed energy committee members. And basically the notes of that outreach are in the Google document that I had shared with the group. So that's how I arrived at that Google Doc. I then met with Becky Torres at Town Hall, and we discussed this question of RFP, or whether we could gather enough information through outreach to other communities, and maybe asking a standard list of questions to each of the consultants directly, but perhaps more informally than an RFP. Becky wanted to do some of her own homework by reaching out to another town administrator first, and I have not been able to meet with her since then. So I was not able to reach a firm position with her, like just getting a sense of where, how she was thinking about it. But I did have that first meeting. I also have an active dialogue with Colonial Power and Mass Power Choice. So if our due diligence route has us sending consultants a list of questions, I know who to address at each of those companies. The third company, Good Energy, has not really responded to multiple outreach efforts by phone and email. But based on feedback from other towns, I didn't uncover any negative feedback about any of the three companies. But I would say Colonial Power and Mass Power Choice, both seem to be held in very high regard amongst the communities that they work with. So, because of the town administrator's position in issuing RFPs and contract arrangements, obviously Becky's position is central to this stage of the process. But I did want to ask the committee if it's appropriate for ECAC to have an opinion on whether we should issue a formal RFP, or if, as a committee, we think that we can gather enough information to develop a recommendation one way or the other. So that's where I wanted to kind of leave it with you.
Nate, is there any reason why we couldn't go ahead and send the same questionnaire to the two companies without making any promises, and until we decide or discover what Becky's preference is as administrator? I mean, it doesn't hurt to get information.
It's a good question. I think that if we issued a formal RFP, there'd probably be a role for us to populate that RFP with some of those same questions. I don't know. It seems like it could be a duplication, but maybe this is like new territory for me. So
My guess is that we'd be in a better position to have gathered some information on our own, because without counting on our language or our questions being put into the RFP. My history, at least, is that Becky is pretty particular about what gets put in an RFP. And I think we'd be in a better place if we had some information that we gathered on our own. And it may be in addition to whatever is asked in the RFP. It may duplicate what's asked in the RFP, but.
Michael, all right, we can't hear you.
Now you can hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I got to get new speakers. Anyway, Isaac, did you have a question or a point?
Well, I'd looked at this previously, and I looked basically at the, I was going to put it in the chat, but I noticed there wasn't a chat. But
Welcome to town meeting.
yeah, looking at all of the kind of surrounding communities, basically, Leverett, Wendell, the smaller, like I would imagine similar communities in our area have gone with Colonial, I think, and the rates that they've secured are rather high. I mean, it's like 22, 24 cents lock in, and that's marginally better for the winter, but during the summer months, that's not great. Now, I think it would be great to kind of, and maybe this has already been discussed, but to understand what the factors are in in the rates securing and like the terms of contracts that you need to come up with? Because I would imagine a lot of it has to do with the time of year that you make the contract, the amount, like the number of kilowatts, whether it's an opt-in or opt-out situation. So I think it would be great to kind of try to gather, like Gail was saying, like gathering soft information prior to a formal request would maybe be beneficial, because even if Becky does the official RFP and, you know, we could come in with some additional information that she might not have asked, or we can put in our thoughts of based on our. Now, I don't know how Becky would respond to that. I don't know if that would be something like, you know, would she see that as kind of, you know, jumping ahead of a process or something like that. So I don't know if that's something to keep in mind as well. Just being a novice at this.
Gail, I'm gonna jump in for a minute. So Nate, I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, the easy one is I think we, as a committee, we can have an opinion and we can offer it. So we should. I don't know this for sure, but I think just like many other things in municipal government, the common sense doesn't always make sense. So the whole procurement process is pernickety. And so it's very easy to get disqualified. And so my hunch is that there's a possibility, I don't know for sure, but a possibility that if the town, i.e. us, sent out a questionnaire to 2 participants and they responded, that they could get disqualified from actually applying via the RFP, which we clearly would not want to do. So I think that, you know, we could confirm that with Becky, but, you know, my experience is Becky's always busy, and getting back to, you know, getting follow-up is always a challenge. So, you know, my sense would be, my recommendation to Becky would be, listen, we think if we don't have to do an RFP, we can put together the questions that are inclusive of the things that we want to get together. We'll run it by her. We will give her a time to respond by, because that's the only way to really do it. And then we can send it out. But I think it's a matter of making sure that we don't either, we're not planning on RFP, and therefore we don't undermine ourselves.
Mike, can I ask a question? I'm having a little trouble tracking this. So one, why do we think we don't need an RFP? It has to be a competitive bid because it's over.
No, that's what's unclear.
Okay, and then the second thing is, why would somebody be disqualified for giving us information?
I don't know if it's 100%, but if we're representing the town. So if the town says, hey, give us information because we want to know, even if it's, like Isaac said, soft information, there could be another company that said, you already have been talking to these people and they're soliciting information and they have a leg up, and so it's not fair. So I don't know, but I do know the procurement is really pretty strict. So we want to avoid that.
If it's not up for a competitive bid, why?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Either we confirm that we can make a recommendation.
Well, it's a $25,000, I thought, was the threshold for competitive bids, right? It went up, was 15 before.
Yeah, I don't think it's that we're required to. I think it's what the town wants to do. That's where Rita and Becky left it. So Becky was going to inquire with other towns how they did it and come back with a sense of which way does Shutesbury prefer to do it. So I get the feeling from our conversation, we would prefer to avoid an RFP and just ask questions that are specific, because then we can release it. Or if nothing else, we can put it together and make sure that Becky sends it out, and it's less detailed than an RFP. So does that clarify?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Gail?
Can't you send an RFP to particular folks? You don't have to broadcast it, correct?
I think it depends on the situation. I mean, if it's competitive and you're only soliciting certain people, it's not competitive.
I think we really need to get Becky to tell it for a number of reasons. We also don't want her to believe we're going behind her back. And getting information, if it's going to have some effect on the RFP disqualification, we certainly need to get that clarified ahead of time.
Yeah.
So if we could get a determinate, this is what we would like to do. to get some information that may be helpful in putting together an RFP if we need one. And ask her to give us with a get back to us by a date. Yeah.
Nate, what are you gonna say?
So I know that a formal RFP is not strictly necessary. And there's some, I did cover this when, I think the last time I attended a select board meeting. And, you know, I think Michael made a good point at a previous meeting that, you know, down the road, you want to be able to justify your choice, you know, whether you've done the formal RFP route or, you know, perhaps we've generated this list of questions. I wanted to mention that there's a DOER guide that in an appendix has a sort of a prefabricated list of questions that communities should consider asking prospective contractors. So it'd be very easy to generate that list. So yeah, I think that, you know, that would be pretty easy action item to generate, circulate amongst the committee, you know, solidify, and then, you know, forward along to Becky. You know, I would definitely want help wordsmithing that outreach just so that it's, you know, it's just right. But yeah, it seems like a pretty, like a good path. Like I'd be happy to work on that.
I think that's, yeah.
Yes, Nate, you made the point at the presentation that that an RFP is not required, but I think Becky, because she is the procurement officer, was made nervous by that. I think that's what she wanted to check out. So if we can provide her with the list of towns that who have gotten a contract but did not have an RFP, that might be useful too.
That might, I mean, that might be a bunch of work because that means they'd have to call around and find out how they got them. But I would sort of think.
But it's a straightforward question. Did you as a town who now have an aggregator use an RFP?
Well, it's a straightforward question, but to lots of towns, so you have to sort of send it to, you have to find out the emails for all those towns.
Okay. All right.
We don't conveniently have that list.
Nate's got the contacts though.
I think my practical suggestion would be if well, my read is as a committee that we're leaning towards not an RFP and to sort of questions that would solicit an understanding of which is the best vendor. So do I have that right so far? So if that was the case, I would say the next maybe step was, Nate, if you want to put together the document and you could float it with us, and then better to maybe make that recommendation to Becky with a proposed document to say, this is what we're recommending. This is what we're actually recommending sending. Because it could take a while. I mean, we're not in a huge rush in the sense that like we're not facing down a town meeting decision, but we don't want it to take months and months just to sort of get this part out.
Mhm.
So it seems like that's a practical step because my experience, Becky may or may not have, I'm guessing she's going to talk to Leverett. You know, so she may or may not reach out to to Margie, who she checks in with a lot of stuff. So that may or may not happen. And if she sees what we're proposing, it actually might make real that the information she needs in an official RFP, we're going to gather this other way with less, you know, requirements. So if you're willing to sort of put that together and run it by us all, we can talk about it next month and then send it to Becky is probably, I think, a good next step. But how's everyone think about that? Think about that. Cool. Okay. And I would just, yeah, that's cool. Anything else on CCA at this point?
Well, your DPU
Well,
communication.
DPU is the testimony, that's sort of the third one, but we can
Okay.
make it the second one.
Never mind.
And at this point, just to clarify amongst us, it seems like the question about that we have an existing MLP, even though it hasn't been legally resolved, we're just going to continue moving forward because that's what we're going to do. That's a correct understanding? Okay. Gail, Miriam, do you know the background to that? Okay.
If you could go over that a little bit. There's a lot of
Yeah.
acronyms that have been flying around too. Like I'm familiar with some, but MLP is a municipal light and power kind of.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You got it.
Yeah, you got it. So
Get an A for the day.
Thank you.
The man's
We create-
prepared. All right.
we created an MLP in preparation for having broadband, which then got developed into our fiber network. And so traditionally MLPs were created in state law for electricity. And then somewhere along the line, as broadband became a thing and internet became a thing, that was identified as the vehicle for which towns could provide broadband. So I can't remember how many years ago it was, but somewhere between 5 and 10 years, no, 6 years ago, something like that, we created an MLP to do broadband. And Nate was doing his moving CCA along, and then somewhere last spring, we realized Donna McNichol, our town council, pointed out that in state law, it says you cannot have community choice aggregation if you have an MLP. And it's I think the presumption is it's legacy language because it's assuming that it's an electric
Right.
MLP, but they don't differentiate in the state law. And so town council is trying to talk to DPU, which is the Department of Public Utilities lawyer, to clarify, and it just never got clarified. So we as a committee decided we wanted to recommend the town meeting vote anyway, because if you have the vote, you don't have to wait another year. So we did that. And I think now that we have that vote, we're going to keep going along this path until someone slaps our wrists and says no. Gail.
And Gail Huntress's response to that is that our MLP is explicitly only it has no, and it debars electricity as being part of it, as part of the way it was created.
Right. Yeah. I mean, on the town level, it's clear. It's just in statute.
Right, how they interpret the, yeah.
Yeah. So.
But there's a clear argument.
Oh, yeah.
So what? Yeah. Okay.
So besides the fact, if this is what the state wants us to do, which is to sort of, move to better, greener energy.
Yeah.
It'd be counter to state priorities. So I think among the bureaucratic agencies, DPU is at the top or among the top. So it's not hopeful.
I had a quick question too, for Nate. When I was looking at the website, the aggregation website, I was looking at Hadley, and Hadley had a different website, and it looked like it was kind of their own thing. And I didn't understand, like I wasn't sure whether it was another one of those companies, but just they had their own, like Hadley had their own website instead of going through the company.
Yeah. So Hadley is with Good Energy. So that third consultant, and it's written into the regulations for setting up CCA that there needs to be some public interface of that kind that posts like, the information on the rates, and all of the towns have a web-based means of opting into a different source, for example, or making some changes. So the websites will either have like a colonial look, like you can tell that there was colonial, and it's kind of the same with the other two as well. But Hadley's with Good Energy, and that would explain the different look for them.
Thank you, Nate.
Do they handle those websites, or do we handle our own website?
They would handle it.
Or okay, there would be a Shutesbury CCA page posted by Colonial or whoever we choose.
Yeah,
Yes.
it would be something also that hooks up to the Massachusetts state page, and our town name would be added there with a
Ah,
hyperlink you could click into.
and go
Um,
directly to.
yeah, because
Cool.
you could shop around and see like what they look like all around. Like some are 9 cents a kilowatt hour, some are 12, 13, and there's some that have different options, right? Like there's, you know, the regular allotment of green for, 9 cents a kilowatt, and then like the super green 100% for 13 cents a kilowatt that you can opt into. And some are opt in and opt out programs, that kind of stuff. I think it would be really great to understand, and if you already know this, we can kind of chat offline, but um, how the rates, like what affects the rates, and like where we as a town might expect to be based on the experiences of other towns, and like is it based on the number of kilowatt hours per year you're securing, how long your contract term is, et cetera, et cetera. Because if we go down the road, like we could spend 2 years on this to find out that we would be locking in at 22 cents per kilowatt hour, which is marginally better in the winter, but not so much in the summer when a lot of people are using electricity for, climate control, that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, well, the one thing we've talked about as leading up to this last year was that we probably have three options. So one sort of a money saving option, and then there's a green, and then there's like a super green. So for people who are opting into the green and the super green, the pricing would be less of an issue. So if it was more green at a similar price, there's going to be a group of people who want to buy into that, and then other people who just want to save the money and don't care as much about the mix. Gail and then Nate.
But before you get there, the prices are set at a certain time according to the market value. So those that were set 2, 3, 4 years ago have reflected in a very low rate that's held constant over the years of the contract. So if they've got a 5-year contract at 5 cents a kilowatt hour, they're in good shape. The market's not so hot for us now. That's part of the reality check.
Yeah, I guess it'd be good to know when like Leverett and when Wendell like sign their contracts and that kind of stuff, because those are the 22 cents. And I would imagine it's a similar size market, to a small in comparison to larger towns, largely populated towns.
Nate?
Yeah, totally. I mean, Gail nailed it. It really does seem to be the time that you go to market. So, and I had even asked folks if Colonial in particular, like, is it helpful for a small town like Shutesbury to, go out to bid with a bunch of other towns, at the same time? And they said, you know what? It's really like what really drives that price is when you go to bid. So I think a good consultant would help us walk through like, oh, Russia just invaded Ukraine. Maybe you don't want to lock into a 3-year contract now. Maybe you want a 1-year contract. That would be part of the that process. But it's really hard to know until we find out what the geopolitical landscape is, or if we can buy Cape Wind source electricity, or some of the new things that are coming online, or what have you. So
I'm sure it's even a sensitive to like, I don't know, like if you buy propane in the summer, it's less than $2 a gallon, versus if you're buying it in the winter, it could be $4.25 a gallon. So.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. And then I want to move us on to the next subject, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this a couple of meetings ago, or maybe it was the last meeting, that there was some new information that Amherst and I think it was Northampton was
And
going,
Pelham.
and Pelham were developing their own CCA entity. And, would it make sense for us to be reaching out and researching this and finding out at this stage before we start locking into things, whether this might be something we want to, be a part
Nate's
of?
been in touch with them. He can report out.
yeah, I wrote Darcy about this, and who is a non-voting member on the board that is in charge of the Amherst Northampton Pelham effort.
She's the mover and shaker.
It's a I think they're called Valley Green Energy, and she introduced me to other folks, but I've not really gotten a a clear answer about, you know, how they're thinking about it, other than to say that long term, they do seem to be envisioning opening up to other towns joining. But they're still, I think, at the point of, you know, putting their initial plans together and getting in the DPU queue. But yeah, I can certainly like keep trying to chase down that information. But yeah, the synchronization of joining that, it's a little not unclear to me exactly how that would work or how difficult that would be. But I think it's important to keep tabs on. Yeah.
I can just confirm some of that because I talked to Darcy maybe 3 years ago about this.
Who is Darcy?
Darcy Dumont she's an Amherst resident. She's the person who is moving the CCA process for Amherst.
Okay.
And she used to be on this Amherst Select Board, but she's been off for 2 years. And she happens to be Nate Murphy's mother-in-law. So everything's a small valley. But in any case, when I talked to her, I got, you know, this was before we were doing anything. I was excited about it. And I said, Shutesbury wanted to be part of this. And their vision is to have it be more towns. But, you know, and the cool thing about it is because they're essentially going to be their own broker, the money, like the little cents that we would give to a broker would be given to the member towns. The towns could then use it for municipal projects as they sought to. But they're creating a nonprofit to do this and to manage it. So there's a lot of organizational infrastructure. So to Nate's point, they're not ready to accept other people. And I think what we could do is sort of put on our training wheels and work with a broker. And then when our contract is up, we'll be experienced enough that we can understand how to join them. And they will hopefully be ready by then. So that's my take. So I'm going to move us to stretch code just because I want to make sure that Nate gets to eat something before he plays hockey.
Sure. Yeah, appreciate that. So I sent around some stretch code materials, and I think at our last meeting we were talking about you know, what an education or outreach strategy might look like, and whether we might model it on what we did for CCA, which, you know, given the vote at town meeting, like seemed to work really well. So, you know, I think as far as outreach materials go, it's kind of hard to improve, I think, on the materials that DOER put together. Like they have this detailed FAQ, and that really it starts at square one with like, what are building codes, and you know, what kinds of building codes are there, you know, as well as some of the slide deck presentations, which I think could easily be you know, adapted to our context for the purposes of outreach. I did write Chris Mason, you know, our Green Communities Regional Coordinator, because I wanted to give him an update on, you know, where we are with CCA, just to say, hey, we had this, you know, vote at town meeting, you know, is there any, you know, good advice you could give us? But, you know, while we were tossing messages back and forth, he mentioned that DOER is preparing to provide speakers on the new code. So he was sure that they could provide someone if we were to organize a community event along the lines of what we did for CCA. And he would just need to know kind of what our timeline is for putting something together like that. So I think like there's two prongs to this. There's the fact that we're a green community and the regular stretch code was updated, which is to say that there are new building codes in Shutesbury that people probably don't know. You know, in the last time when we met, Miriam had asked about electric ready new construction, right? So in my head, I was like, oh yeah, that's part of this opt-in code that the town needs to vote on. But it's actually just part of the stretch code, which we are already accountable to as a community. So there's a lot of cool stuff just in the new code alone that would be worth like talking about. And then, you know, we can also sort of lay out the case for this opt-in code, which would, you know, truly be like the net zero path. And that's something that you could put to the town for a vote. Do we want to be on a net zero path by 2050? That's the question.
So just to I have a clarification question, then we can just chat. So there's the base code, there's the stretch code, and then there's a specialized code. And the specialized code is the net zero code.
That's correct.
And we've already approved stretch code for Shutesbury.
Yes, by virtue of being a green community, yeah.
And so from what I read from the FAQs, once you're in a category, you continue with that category unless you vote to step out of it. So we would either vote to go to the specialized, which would up our commitment, or hypothetically, one could vote to not be a green community and we could downscale, which I don't even think is possible, but basically we're in the stretch code zone by de facto.
Yes.
Yeah. Gail?
The specialist for new construction only though, right?
No.
New construction and
Renovation.
renovations, yeah, above a certain square footage.
Or the 1,000 square feet, yeah.
Yeah. So my thought about community engagement, Nate, and I think doing a community forum makes sense. We can talk about the timing and all that stuff. The fact that you wouldn't have to be the expert and we could actually have a green communities expert in the room would be great. My sense is
Nathan's thumbs went up pretty quickly on that one.
Yeah, I know. My sense is we should really go. I think it would be good to go into it with a inquisitive mindset as opposed to we're thinking about making a recommendation.
Right.
Just because of two parts. One is because people don't know what they're already committed to because the town's part of it, and that, you know, where there's pushback, you know, it's easier to say, well, if I live in town and I'm not building a new building, it doesn't include me. So you sort of would assume there'd be less pushback, but it's the renovation part where all of a sudden people are going to sort of get their back up. And so introducing the conversation to say, this is something we can do. We're already committed to X. This is the difference. And then based on the information, it's sort of like a public hearing, but it's not. You know, we're really just engaging and gathering information. I can imagine then we would come back as a committee, talk about it. And if we decide to propose going to the specialized, then we can have a public hearing.
Michael, what about getting some information perhaps from an electrician? Maybe from Mo Gregoire, our electrical inspector, but what this might look like for average homeowners.
Well, if we do a presentation, I think that would be a great idea.
Because I think people need to have an understanding of what these requirements look like.
Yeah.
That would be the point of it. I mean, okay, there are these new requirements. What would it mean to you if we?
But to get an electrician, professional electrician, or someone knowledgeable about what the expense and logistics are.
I think it depends. I mean, the on the ground perspective makes sense. Who it would be, how they can explain it, and how they can understand it, because not every electrician is going to be savvy to this stuff. So I think,
Or a good presenter. I mean, we've got somebody here at Green Communities who, that's his business.
yeah, Isaac's being very polite, raising his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just regarding the renovations, I was looking at the requirements and it's above 1,000 square feet, but also it has to be a conditioned space. So if you were doing something that was an unconditioned space, it wouldn't be necessarily have to be under these requirements. But you know, that's kind of splitting hairs, but it's good to say to like put that information to the forefront for people that are concerned. I saw for new buildings, it looks like there are some incentives that are available. I also wasn't sure, but you know, if there were incentives available for renovations, that might make people a little bit more amenable to it. So it's just about getting out in front of where people will be concerned and try to allay those concerns at the forefront instead of letting them seethe and rage, you know?
Welcome to Shutesbury.
Well said.
Exactly. It's always an effort, but I think that's, I mean, if we like the idea, then it would be a matter of figuring out when we want to do it and how we design it. So Miriam, to your point, you know, the design could be, you know, introduction, state presentation, you know, Nate saying something, an electrical expert or something, Q&A. I mean, there's way we should design it so that we're providing, you know, information that's informative. To Isaac's point, trying to figure out what people would have pushback on and addressing it, making it real, which is the electrician part. And then I think inevitably people ask questions that we won't have thought of. So that's where, if we then regroup, we can figure out where we want to go. Gail.
But that's the advantage of having this fellow from Green Communities, because he will have thought about it and he will have answers for those questions.
One would hope.
He's advertising that way, at least.
Well,
Yeah.
so I guess like in the like FAQ, like number 13, like you go to that website and request somebody to come and talk about it. But I would wonder, like, that person that comes to speak, are they steeped in a smaller culture of, like, you know, small like valley town versus, you know, someplace that's a little more happening with a higher population density? So yeah, we don't know what the speaker will be sensitized to, so it might be good if we could reach out and have a conversation prior to that.
We have to set him up. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So it seems like we like this idea of doing a forum. Am I reading the room correctly? So so we're middle end of September, you know, so I think we had the same conversation last year about CCA. So like I think we planned for the sweet spot between Thanksgiving and like the Christmas, New Year's holidays. It's like a time where people have brain space. We could also just, you know, tootle around, and depending on what you guys, I mean, Nate, it really comes down to you. And, you know, if Isaac's going to end up helping you, how much CCA takes up brain space, because they're both heavy lifts. So we could do some casual reaching out and engagement and plan for, you know, like mid-January or something like that. And if there's, you know, we can have this person present to us. If we want to have someone come to us and we can talk to them first, that might be not a bad screen. Educate ourselves before we go public, so to speak.
Yeah, trying to figure out the sticking points, you know, do a dry run. Also, like, in terms of advertising for this, I mean, I'm not, you know, I haven't been to the dance, but you know, there's a town newsletter that comes out. Like, I don't know how many times a year or when that comes out, but that could be an avenue. You know, and yeah, public forum, and if we can make it as convivial as possible, like, you know, I mean, I'd be happy to like work with my wife and make some baked goods and, you know, like just make it a warm and cozy thing, as opposed, you know, I think it's, when presenting to the town, we have to explain the benefits to you. Like, with somebody coming in, is what's in it for me? Like, how is this going to benefit me outside of doing the right thing for the environment? Because that's not everybody's motivation. So then also, what are going to raise people's hackles and try to allay that in advance.
Yeah, I see the dynamic around the stretch codes is different than CCA. You know, so CCA, the easiest sell is to say, if you don't care about the environment, you might save money. You know, so
Right.
that's the way. With the stretch codes, it really is government saying we're regulating things, and we're sort of making it harder. You know, there's no easy stretch code. So it's a different dynamic, and it's not to say that a lot of people won't be supportive, but it is a different dynamic, I think. Nate?
I could also imagine people getting upset not knowing or agreeing to being in the stretch code, but we are actually in the stretch code. It's like,
Right.
well, I didn't realize we were in this and I didn't want to be in this, so I'm unhappy just at the start of this meeting. So like those are things to think about.
Yeah, no, definitely true.
So it's either in the FAQ or the PowerPoint, you know, the slide deck that I sent, but the state did model costs for
Right.
different kinds of construction, and sort of
They said it
penciled
was
out.
cheap.
Yeah, over the long run, it's cheaper to not have to lay pipe to get gas, a gas line to your house. Uh, you know, then there's like all the rest of it, right? So, you know, this is another case where the costs are, present some savings. Ultimately.
Yeah, the only caution I would say, Nate, is, all the policymakers live in Boston. And so they don't have a rural sensibility. So like, if you have propane on the side of your house, there's no cost to running any pipes because you don't have sewer, you don't have, you don't have gas, et cetera. So it all depends on where they're coming from. And at least 7 times out of 10, if not 8, they have no clue about how rural really works. So it's a good caution.
Yeah, I saw that slide also, and I was curious, like, okay, what are those numbers based on? And like to Michael's point, like we were living in West Newton prior to moving to Shutesbury, and it would have cost tens of thousands of dollars to run sit like gas down our street, and it would be like one of those things where you'd have to get everybody in the neighborhood on board to make it somewhat feasible to do it. So it's kind of crazy, but you just get a tank and you run a little bit right to your house, and it's a whole different ball of wax. Yeah.
What is this? What slide deck are you referring to, Nate? I think I missed this.
Sure. Yeah, I sent a message around.
A couple of days ago.
Yeah, maybe a couple of days ago.
Is it from you or it just
Yep.
went to? Because I saw all the CCA stuff, but was that where it was?
It was. Let me just search that code.
There were 3 hyperlinks kind of sandwiched together, and I
It was
clicked on one and
yesterday.
thought it was.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
a
it was yesterday.
hyperlink.
Yeah, there were 3 hyperlinks, 3 separate ones.
I am not seeing where
No,
this.
it wasn't yesterday.
Oh, so it's embedded in an email.
Yeah,
Somebody just send it back to me because I missed it. I can't.
Sure.
sure. We can do that. So Nate, do you have any sense, like a gut feeling about timing?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. So I think if we can get the person to present to us, maybe that would be the first step, and then we could figure out based on that person's scheduling, when we would do the forum. So I don't know if they can come next month or the month after, but
Right. Yeah, I think that's something I can write Chris about. I don't know how ready they are to go. If they're ready to go,
they can test it on us.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, those are 2 like big windows, like early in the new year or sometime between Thanksgiving and Christmas. We can see what they have to offer.
Yeah, and just CC me, because if you're feeling like there's too much emailing, I can help you out. But if they can get to us for our October meeting or November meeting, it seems like that makes it, that would push it into the new year, but that's fine. And I do think if they want to trial run it, we're a friendly town committee. It's not like it's a huge public forum, so they should know enough to be able to present to us. So, are we good with this one? Great, and thank you, Nate. Thank you for all this research. So the last thing is the testimony for municipal aggregation, and the background here is Nate, got this sign-on letter and asked me what he thought if we as a committee could send something in. And my sense is we don't have to get town approval to send something from a town committee. We are allowed to have our own opinion. But better to send it on behalf of our committee as opposed to just having Nate send it in as his own self. So I suggest that he draft something and share it with us and get feedback. So that's how we got to where we are today. So I don't know if people got to see it, people have thoughts. I have some, but I can wait my turn. So Anyone else have any thoughts they want to share? Okay. So I had two thoughts, if that's let's see, hold on. I'm
While
just
you're
looking.
looking, can I share my thought?
Oh yeah, go for it. I didn't see you. I was looking at my screen.
I
Sorry.
was totally impressed with what Nate is presenting as the ECAC. They're professionally and smoothly written and documented and speak very well for Shutesbury and the committee. And I was just totally impressed.
Well, I can't really take credit for 95% of the material. So
You doctored some of the templates though, and you got
I
them
did.
going, and you
Yeah.
got them, yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
So let's see. Hold on. There you go. Miriam, Isaac, you guys have any comments before I jump in?
Go for it.
Okay.
I don't know anything about it, so.
Okay. So Nate, I think in terms of the sign-on letter, for the most part, I was good. The one thing I was just trying to find, I can email it to you. There was one thing I think you just maybe overlooked when you were using their language, which was there was something they said about, and we're proud of our success or something like that. And it seemed like we haven't done any of this stuff yet. So it's sort of, we should just frame the language as, it's great that the Commonwealth has done it, but I think just remembering that we're writing from our experience and our perspective. So, because it came from them. So, they have a statewide perspective about what they've done for the state. So it was the only sentence that jumped out in terms of that. I think with the letter to Joe, my two thoughts on that, and I'm fine with you just taking this in and figuring out how to edit it. But two is, it seemed a little, it's ironic coming from me, but it seemed a little intense and like strongly positioned. Like Shutesbury has been living with this headache of DPU, and we haven't even engaged DPU yet. So like, because I don't think you have a relationship with Joe, but she has a relationship with the town and she counts on us. So I think being able to speak from our truthful, the equivalent of our lived experiences as a town is more helpful to her. Like what she needs, because she's willing to advocate. She'll call and she'll do stuff. And so to really tell, I think it's fine to say, this is what we're hearing and we're concerned because, we're going to step into this morass of bureaucratic hell. And that's not helpful to, advancing the state's priorities. But I think the way it got written, because you sort of incorporated the frustration of the folks who wrote the letter, I would just retool it to say, we are concerned because we're newbies to this, the beginning of the process. And what everyone who's in the middle of it is telling us is that it's ugly and it needs to change. So like, that's legitimate. And she can represent us that way. So that's just my feedback.
Is this a good vehicle to raise the MLP question, or should we let sleeping dogs lie?
No, I think this is a great opportunity to put it in. And that's my other thought was like, if we're tying it to our experience, there's two things. So we're at the beginning of a pipeline, and we understand that the pipeline includes DPU, which is a time suck and a bureaucratic suck, and then also involving DPU, which she knows about our fiber network, and I think it's fine to say our other concern is we're still she's the co-sponsor and one of the mover and shakers of the solar forum. So she's highly attuned to how to advance, green energy priorities. And so if a DPU decision about statute is not forthcoming, it could mean that we're not participating in CCA or if they make the wrong decision. So I think giving her a heads up, she's a very real person. And I think just being able to write and say, this is the deal. It doesn't have to be fancy. She'll respond fine. But I appreciate you. And if you want, I mean, if you want to rewrite it and just say like, what do you think? I'm happy to look at it again. So, but
Yeah, I totally will. And I definitely appreciate that I dumped like 25 pages of material on the committee pretty close to this meeting. But I did want to just like take just a really quick step back just for like a minute. And there's the DPU guidelines. And one question is, what does this mean for how hard we're pursuing CCA, as a community? And I did want to just say that my read of the guidelines, as well as this pending legislation that is in committee regarding municipal aggregation, I don't think that any of that activity should slow us down in terms of just what we're trying to do as a community, because we don't know what the future will bring, and it's better to be in a position of having I think done this work and gone down this path than to just wait and see what might shake out of this process. So you have legislative action that is responding to delays in the Department of Public Utilities approving aggregations. And the Department of Public Utilities has generated these guidelines, which I'm convinced constrain the choice set somewhat. I still think there's a strong value proposition, even if the DPU guidelines were implemented as written. But I can see issues with the way they've phrased things, and am convinced that the guidelines, if enacted, would not address the core issue with the challenges that communities are having setting up these aggregations. So yeah, there's like a lot going on within these attachments. So I just wanted to like kind of set that table a little bit. But that's all I had. Thanks.
yeah,
It is called community choice, not DPU choice. And,
you might slip that in. It sounds like a good one. Yeah. And I mean, what I got from your writings was, the micromanagement was really, I think, a key part, that if it's supposed to be, Gail's point, community design, and then one of the things that stuck in my mind is if you wanted to actually change your plan, you'd have to re-enter this process. Like, I mean, there's just procedural hurdles that would get put in place that make a cumbersome process agonizing. So like, we want to go the other direction, not add to it. So I got that from what you said. So in terms of the draft testimony that Nate sent, I think we should take a vote just to, approve him sending it in. So if someone to make a motion just to approve the language either in whole or, with slight edits.
I move that ECAC approve the draft statement prepared by Nate and send it in. Yeah.
Miriam, you want a second?
Sure, I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion about that?
Well, should we be spelling out what's gonna be edited, or are we all clear about that?
Well, my only suggestion is that one sentence, which I'll send to Nate, which basically talks about us having a hard time, but we haven't experienced it yet. So aside from that, I'm good with everything. So any other? Okay. Well, when I call the roll, Gail?
Aye.
Miriam?
Aye.
Nate?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So it is approved. You can make the change and send it in.
So that's
Testimony.
the testimony. Should we have separate consideration of the communications to our representatives? And there's this issue of the pending legislation that we could urge to be voted out of committee on the Hill. So timing wise, that might be less urgent. We could like kick it down the road, but I was wondering what people's thoughts were on sort of that package.
It seems like I was the only one who had comments in terms of the email. And, I guess one question is, were you going to send it to Aaron as well?
Yes, I had two versions of the same letter that are identical. Yeah, one to our representative and one to our senator.
Okay. Yeah. So.
And Gail had responded with some edits as well.
Okay.
So.
Well, if the timing is not as pressing, do you want to rework it and then we can discuss it next time, if that works for everybody? I mean, I'm sort of thinking about, we could sort of give you the blessing to send it, based upon edits, but it might be cleaner and you might have a better comfort level if you share it and we discuss it. My only other 2 cents, Aaron is an energy geek. So you should just know that. I mean,
Aaron
I met with Aaron Saunders,
is what?
an energy geek.
Oh,
Yeah. So like a year ago when he was running, I met with him at Cushman. And I think we talked for about 2 hours about energy and solar, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the meeting, he said, any day talking about energy policy is a good day. So not many people say that. So just as for background, Isaac.
Yeah, I just had a question. Also, we had recently put in a solar array on our house, and there was a cap, and we had been working with, like, there's a 10 kilowatt cap for, like, residential solar. And that was, I think it was placed by National Grid, because I think Eversource has a different cap. Depends on the utility that you work with. And we had.
Is it a cap or a cap on the SMART program? You can have more.
Yes, right. Yes, a cap on the SMART program, because that's the thing where it's, because if you go over, then it's like you're getting pennies on the dollar when you're selling it back, and then you can, apply for a special permit, which could take up to 6 months, and you get half of what you get for the the regular rate that the utility is charging. And we were trying to defer because we are a large home with many people, and we do use, as conscientious as we are, we do use a decent amount of energy. So we were trying to increase without going over the cap, and we were waiting, with the solar company. They're saying there's litigation going on the Hill, and hopefully it would be expanded and blah blah blah. But I don't know what the state of that is, and if this committee, because the way that things stand. And I want to be sensitive to the environmental issues, but the way that things, I'm not being insensitive to the environmental issues, because I feel like solar energy is way cleaner and better than any other, energy that you're going to get. But the way that it's written, at least for National Grid, for the SMART program, our community, like the way that we live, it's not as cookie cutter as someplace in Boston or where that makes more sense, so.
I'm not following what you're saying.
Yeah, I think that advocacy, like, I know that.
You want to know if we can advocate for that stuff.
Exactly. We worked with Greenfield Solar, and they were going to meetings on the Hill, and they were talking about that. And I didn't know if that's something that this committee was interested in following and putting energy behind it anyway. But that was a curiosity for me, and I just didn't know where that stood.
Yeah, I think the short answer would be, if you're on the committee and you wanted to follow it and report in on that stuff, because I think there's impacts for residents. One of the things that we've been trying to clarify in our first year of committee life was, what's the scope of the work? And so like CCA and stretch codes are very much municipally oriented, installing solar in municipal buildings is, there's that. There's some part where we'd want to benefit residents who live in town, because obviously that makes sense, but differentiating how deep we get in that given our bandwidth. But I think knowing it, because there's an educational component, so we've talked about being able to educate people on what the things are. And there is going to be a revision of SMART. So like, there was SREC 1 and SREC 2, and now we're going from SMART to SMART 2 at some point. I don't think anyone's seen it yet, but I'm sure they're working on it because they keep referencing updates to SMART. So who knows? But I mean, if you want to track it, let us know.
Yeah, there was a lot of learning that we had to do on and it wasn't an easy process. So to for our group or some, part of the municipality to be a resource to somebody who is looking at solar, just to have a resource a human being to talk to, that they could go and ask, what should I be worried about? What should I be thinking about? What are considerations? I would have really appreciated that at the time, but you got to do the work on your own. But it's really nice to support the community in that way, just educationally, that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I think having something like on a web page and that minimally would be helpful. So I think that would make sense. So I'm going to move us to minutes, if that's okay. So we got minutes from Gail from August 15th. So I have a motion to consider the minutes of August 15th, 2023.
Second.
Who first did?
I'll move.
Okay,
I'll second.
cool. Any other discussion? Okay. Well, hearing none, why don't we vote? Miriam?
Aye.
Nate?
Aye.
Gail?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So unanimously approved. And so if I'm correct, I think Miriam, you would be note taker next time, if that's okay.
All right.
And I think I was gonna, just before we wrap, I was gonna see when the logical next meeting would be. So the third week in October would be the 17th, and I will be out of town, but we could do the 24th if that works for folks. Does the 24th work of October?
What was the date?
October 24th.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So before we adjourn, just to summarize, I think, Isaac, we haven't scared you off, it seems like. Okay, cool. So I think what we'll do next meeting is we'll just put on the agenda of, a vote to recommend to the select board that Isaac be considered as a ECAC member. And so Isaac, the process is the select board does the appointing and the committee does the recommending. So I think next meeting we'll have the vote to recommend you and then we'll send to the select board. But, you should just plan on coming to the next meeting and jumping in, and then, the select board will slot you into their process, but it doesn't mean you can't participate between those two activities. So, and thank you for your active involvement in this. It's great to have another person who's passionate and informed. So that's cool.
Well, thanks for having me. And again, in the interim, I'm happy to, put work in, to put work into anything that needs working on between now and the next meeting. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Cool. I think you're directing that mostly at Nate, as it should be. Cool. So anything else before we wrap? Nate?
So we picked the 24th. I do want to ask, what time works for people?
Oh,
that was.
We're still on the 5 o'clock for hockey, right? We're still in the season.
Yeah, still hockey season, but I didn't want to make any assumptions about
5
people's
o'clock works.
availability.
Okay. Yeah, I was assuming we would do 5 until whenever that
End of
ends.
season. Yep.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. It makes a huge difference.
It's the least we could do.
Yeah.
Just a quick
So I
question.
have a motion to adjourn.
Just a quick question. What are the, outside of hockey season, what are the usual hours?
7,
Seth?
yeah. So we get to eat dinner and then talk as opposed to the other way around. So, cool. Anyone want a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
A second?
Okay. Who seconded?
I did. Gail.
Okay, cool. Okay, any discussion? Nope. Okay, Miriam,
I.
Nate,
Aye.
Gail,
Aye.
and I'm an I. We are adjourned.
Yay. Thank you all.
See you
Thank you.
later. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Isaac.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you so much.